Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Hannah Elizabeth and this is my YouTube channel, grecochess. We're going to interrupt the games that I'm playing against the chess.com bots because I'm going to show in this and the next videos the games that I played in an actual rated tournament, the 80th chessanity tournament. And we're going to start. I'm going to share with you the announcement of the tournament. It took place in Syosset, New York, that is in Long Island. The, the pictures that you see here are from the previous location in Jericho. They are not from Syosset. And the trophies, just to tell you, are only for the lowest rated categories. There are various sections. See here, I participated in the section that's called Quad. What does this mean? What does Quad mean? The players were divided into groups of 4 based on their ratings, and in each group, every player had to face the other 3. And since I had the second best rating, I ended up in the top group. I had to face the people that were rated first, third, and fourth. The time control. G40, D5. This means that when the game started, players had 40 minutes on their clocks. And when it was their time to play for the first 5 seconds, this is a delay, the clock would not move. But after that, it would start going downhill, could continue going downhill, and players needed to complete all their moves before the clock went down to 0. In round number 1, my opponent was Hannah Elizabeth Lin with a rating of 1334 and in the 77.4 percentile. Compare this with mine. I have a rating of 1560 and I'm in the 85.5 percentile. This means clearly I'm the favorite. My rating is more than 2 points higher than her. But let's see what actually happened on the chessboard because that's the only thing that counts. I had the white pieces and Hannah had the black. Here you, on the left part, you'll see the chessboard. On the right part of the screen, you're going to see the computer evaluation. In every move, it will tell you who is better. A positive number means that white is better. A negative number means that black is better. And for every move, it will tell you if it was the best move, and if not, which should have been the best move, and which are the top 3 moves for the opponent. And what will the evaluation be if the opponent plays any of these 3 moves. And we are starting, I have white as I mentioned. Hannah has black, and I start with my e pawn to e4. Hannah plays with the Scandinavian defense. Pawn goes from d7 to d5. And I take the pawn. And many times the opponent may use the queen to take the pawn, but if you do so, then the knight goes to c3, threatens the queen, and the queen wasted 2 moves, the first 2 moves going back and forth. To avoid this possibility, Hannah played what many players do, place the knight from g8 to f6. The pawn is attacked twice, and it's not easy to be defended, meaning if I put my knight to c3, for example, or my queen to f3, or my bishop to c4, then I defend it once, well, it's attacked twice, and I'm going to lose it, and material will be even. The only way to keep the extra pawn would be to move the pawn from c2 to c4, but my experience has shown that this doesn't lead to good positions. Usually black will take the pawn of the knight, lose the knight, the queen takes the pawn, and black has a nice queen in the center of the board, having sacrificed a piece for 2 pawns. Instead, I did what is the theoretical move. I placed my pawn from d2 to d4, and Hannah now takes the pawn. Not the d4, of course, the d5 pawn of the knight. I attack the knight with my c-pawn. By moving this pawn, not only I attack the knight, but also I allow my knight later on to go to c3 without blocking my c-pawn. And Hannah places her knight back to f6. We completed 4 moves. All of them are book moves. And now we're going to deviate from theory. I'm going to develop my knight from g1 to f3. It's the best, but it's not a book move. Hannah is going to pin my knight. The computer thinks a good move, but the computer would rather have the pawn go from c7 to c5. By doing so, you attack the pawn at d4, and if I take the c5 pawn, Hannah is going to take my queen, I take back with my king, and I lose castling rights. I unpin my knight by placing my bishop on e2. Hannah places her pawn to e6. And until now, all my 6 moves were either book moves or the best. Now move number 7, I'm castling, which the computer thinks is good, but would rather have my queen go to b3 and attack the pawn of b7. And develops the bishop to e7. I develop the other knight to c3. Hannah castles. I place my bishop on e3 here. Not only develop my bishop, I also overprotect the pawn at d4. And Hannah pushes her pawn to c6, not only exerting pressure on the square d5, the central square, but also not allowing my knight to go to b5 and perhaps end in c7 if the bishop would support it or somebody else. I want to place my rooks on central files. I start with my rook from f1 going to e1, and Hannah imitates me. The rook from f8 goes to e8. We completed 10 moves up to this point. I'm a little bit ahead, 0.97. You see, well, that's not crucial. The game has not yet been decided. Now I want to attack. My knight goes to e5, and not only my knight has a nice central square, but also attacks the bishop on g4. The computer thinks that it is an inaccuracy. Would rather have me attack the bishop with moving my pawn to h3. The reason I did not do it is because this can lead eventually to a hook. And eventually, if the board is cleared enough, black may be able to win both of my g and h pawns for the price of a piece and place my king in a very precarious situation. Hannah is going to avoid losing a piece by taking my bishop. The computer thinks it's a great move, although later on the statistics it wouldn't list it. It thinks a great move, but for me I think it's obvious. Great move is supposed to be one that, although it is a very good for the player, it is not obvious and comes as unexpected. Myself, I expected this move to come. My queen take back the bishop. Hannah develops her knight to d7, hoping to exchange with my knight because my knight on e5 and knight at the opponent's part of the board can usually be very dangerous. I move my rook to d1, so both of my rooks are in central files. In addition, if Hannah decides to exchange the knights, then my rook attacks the queen. To avoid this possibility, Hannah places her queen on c7. My bishop goes to f4, and there is the possibility of a threat against the queen. Only my knight blocks this possibility. But the problem is that if I put my knight in more squares, Hannah can easily take my bishop. Only g6 and d3 are squares where I attack the queen, and black cannot take back my bishop because the knight protects the bishop. In other games I've played on the internet, usually, if there is a rook on either f8 or h8, for example, if Hannah had not moved the rook from f8 to e8, then I place my bishop, excuse me, my knight on g6, and I have a double attack. Both the bishop attacks queen, knight attacks rook, and also black cannot take the bishop because the knight will take the queen. Hannah will take my knight. Now she can take it without worrying about the rook. I take it back with my bishop. The computer would rather take me with the pawn. Then the pawn attacks the knight, the knight has to move, and Well, it has some squares to go, but the reason I did not do it is because, first of all, I attack not the knight but the queen, and second, the pawn would have blocked the bishop. Now the bishop is in the center of the board and is free. It is in the long diagonal. Hannah will save, of course, a queen, goes back to d8. And let me tell you, when you threaten the opponent at this level, you don't expect your opponent to miss your threats. You don't hope that the opponent is going to, quote unquote, fall asleep and give you the game already in a golden platter. The reason why you attack if there is a defense is because your opponent will be forced to play the defensive move and eliminate your threat instead of creating a threat of their own. You'd rather be on the offensive and the opponent defending, even if defend successfully, than the other way around. My knight goes to e4 because I want to eliminate the defensive knight on f6. The computer doesn't like it. We are going to exchange the knights. Bishop goes to d6, trying to get rid of my bishop on e5, which replaced my knight that was here before. I place my rook on d3 because I want my rooks and my queens to be on the f, g, and h files, facing black's king and perhaps creating a dangerous attack. Hannah attacks my pawn by moving, attacks my bishop, not my pawn, by moving the pawn from f7 to f6. And then I place my rook on h3 after a very long thought. Why did I do it, and why does the computer think it is brilliant? Because if black takes my bishop with a pawn, if they take with the bishop, we're just exchanging pieces. But if they take with the pawn to win material, queen goes to h7, check, king goes to either f7 or f8, rook goes to f3, and then either queen has to go to f6 to defend, and then I win the queen, or if the king goes to e7, queen from h7 to e7, each a checkmate. I would like to challenge the viewers, if you have a chessboard in front of you, whether real or electronic, try to play this combination to see where this is going to lead. And in spite of my hopes, because it's not easy to see, Hannah either saw everything or at the very minimum, she thought that I would never blunder a bishop unless there was a good reason for that. And that is why, instead of taking my bishop to the pawn and helping her win the game, she pushes the pawn from h7 to h6, which was really the best move. In fact, I need to show you that taking my bishop to the pawn is not among the top 3 moves of black. So this would have been a blunder for black if they took my bishop instead. They move the pawn to h6, but now my bishop is in real danger, because if black uses the f6 pawn to take my bishop, then my combination does not work and I'm just down a piece. And because my bishop is in a diagonal where it's threatened by the opposite bishop, and I don't want to have a combination where I lose my bishop for nothing or for less than its value, I just exchange it. We exchange the dark colored bishops. My queen goes to g4 and threatens the pawn at h6 because the pawn at g7 is pinned. So my rook can take h6 and I win a pawn. Once again, I'm not expecting my opponent to fall for that and give me the free pawn. But what I expect them to do is postpone any attacking ideas they may have in order to defend against this threat. Hannah places the king on h8. And now, of course, I cannot take the pawn on h6 because I'm going to lose the rook. I was thinking of ideas. If queen goes to g6, sacrifice the rook and have at least a propensity, perhaps get these 3 pawns, then move my rook, but nothing seemed to be working. I didn't want to just make a sacrifice hoping things would come out well unless I was completely sure. Now I threaten a checkmate with my rook on g3, and once again my opponent needs to postpone any attacking ideas I may have and instead deal with the threat of queen g7 mate. And Hannah places rook on e7 and deals with this threat. My rook goes now to e3 from g3. And I'm attacking 3 times the pawn on e6. It's defended only twice. So if I could play second move in a row, rook goes to e6, wins, and I'm a pawn ahead. And of course, I'm not expecting this to happen. What I'm expecting is my opponent to waste a move to defend against this threat, which is exactly what happened. I attack the queen with pawn going to c5. Queen doesn't have too many squares to go. In fact, queen has quite a lot of squares to save herself. b8, c7, d8, d7, and d5. But as we said before, the pawn on e6 is attacked 3 times, defended 3 times now. But if the queen goes, for example, to b8, the pawn is lost. Only 2 moves make sense. Queen goes either d5 or d7. And Hannah decides to send her queen on d5. And by doing so, she's also attacking my pawn on a2. I need to save it unless I can find a nice combination. Of course, if I'm going to find a combination that delivers at least a rook to me, if not a checkmate, then of course I'm going to let her get a pawn. But since I couldn't see any such possibility, my pawn goes from b2 to b3. Save my pawn. Computer thinks the best. Hannah attacks my queen. Pawn goes from f6 to f5. Computer thinks the best. See here that little by little Hannah starts having a small advantage. Of course, I'm going to save my queen, goes to h4. In accuracy, the computer, Hannah's advantage is more than over half a pawn, 0.66. King goes to h7 to overprotect the h6 pawn. The computer thinks it's a mistake and would rather have Hannah push the pawn from e6 to e5. If that would happen at the tail end of the combination, assuming I went all the way to the end, I think black has a back rank mate. But this did not happen. You have to worry about that. Maro goes from e3 to e5, attacks the queen. And queen has only 2 squares to go to be safe. And these are the squares of d7 and d8. Hannah sends her queen to d8. My queen goes to f4. And the black queen goes to a5. Here, the queen attacks the pawn on a2, and I need to do something about it. Unless, of course, I can find a better combination on my side, the more pressing move, which I was not able to find. I don't think it exists. Instead, I defended the pawn by moving my rook to e2. Hannah pushes a queen on b4. I want to get rid of the back rank mate possibility, because until now, any calculation I would do, I would have to worry if, although I might win some material, perhaps near black's king, in the end, black may have a queen or a rook to place on e1 and checkmate to the back rank. To avoid this, I push my pawn from h to h3. It's a good idea if your king is blocked by the 3 pawns in front. If you have a move that is not urgent and you're not sure what to do, just push a pawn in front of the king to make sure that in the future there will be no back rank. And perhaps in the future has happened to me sometimes, is that because I had no back rank problem in my opponent had, I was able to win material out of that. The computer likes my idea, but would rather have me push my pawn from g2 to g3. I'm not sure why, but in any case, from now on, don't have to worry about back rank. And Hannah places a queen on a5, which the computer thinks a mistake, and I'm going to explain why it's a mistake. But at this moment, she offered me a draw. Let me tell you, at this point, I didn't see the mistake. I didn't take advantage of that, but I rejected the draw offer. Why? Because I'd rather learn from a loss than get the easy draw. Usually, I reject draw offers. There are only two times I've ever accepted draw offers, two possibilities. In fact, the one happened only once when I was in a completely lost position. I have no idea why my opponent offered me a draw. And the other case is if the game is going to threefold repetition, and after the second repetition, you see that it's going there and your opponent offers a draw. Well, why waste more time and not immediately accept the draw? So I reject the draw offer, but let me tell you what I should have done. If my rook goes to e6, rook takes e6, then queen checks here. You can see on this line here. Check. Let's see here on the board what happens. Rook goes to e6, rook goes to e6, queen to f5 check. Now, king goes to h8 and I win the rook, so I've kept extra pawns. If the rook would go to g6 instead of the king to h8 to block the check, then my rook from e2 would win the one at e8. In fact, that's what I had missed. I had seen that until now there was a possibility to win 2 pawns if the king went to h8. I didn't see how to continue if the rook went to g6. I missed that my rook from e2 would take the rook on e8. So you see what happened, rook at a6, e6, e6. Queen takes at a2. And at this point, white has one extra pawn. It's not easy because none of them is passed. Oh, you see that white doesn't have to worry about back rank. Otherwise, this combination would not have worked. Queen checks e8. And I'm not sure how to continue, but white is in a much better shape. But I missed it because I didn't see that when the blacks place the rook on g6, my rook from e2 can take e8. What I do is I place my queen to h4. Black places the queen back. This is what's called a miss. Black places the queen back to d8. Till now you see it's more or less even. I have a very small advantage, plus 0.35. My queen goes to f4. Hannah places a queen on c7 to pin my rook. I have to be careful. If the rook moves in most squares it can go, it is either the rook is or my queen is lost. So the rook has to make sure it either is in front of the queen diagonally like here, or it is next to the queen and defends it. But that was a mistake. At that point, I started having 5 minutes, but because that is a very crucial moment that help decide the game, I decided to keep recording a few more moves to show what happened. I took the pawn at f5. The computer thinks it's brilliant, and I'm going to explain why it's such a good move. Because if queen takes queen, then rook takes queen, I'm a pawn ahead. If if the pawn takes the rook, this is the one that needs calculation. Queen takes queen, rook takes queen, and rook takes rook. So either way, rather, I'm a pawn ahead. What I said to do is take my queen, I take a queen, and at this point, I have a plus 2.00 advantage, and I stop recording because I had less than 5 minutes. The game would continue for many more moves. It will go down to the last minute, the last few seconds, and I'm just going to give a summary of what happened. The rooks were exchanged. I go to an ending with an extra pawn. I started activating my king, and so did Hannah, and we're trying to see if we could promote our pawns and stop the opponent from doing so. I ended up being able to promote my pawn first, but to do it, I sacrificed quite a few. Hannah was able to take all of my other pawns, and she ended up keeping her pawns at the B and the C files. Two connected pass pawns for Hannah, a queen for me. Hannah started, and the king, of course, her king was near the pawns in addition, so these three king and 2 pawns made a very strong team. The pawns started being pushed again and again and again. I was trying at least to win one of them. And one has to be careful. There is theory that says if the C pawn makes the second rank, or if you're black, then a queen cannot win it. There are stalemate tricks that can help black survive. The pawns were second and third rank, and If I had the rook instead of a queen, I would be lost. With a queen, at least I could check perpetually and be guaranteed of at least a draw. We reached the last few seconds, and Hannah, while I believe that theoretically she had the draw guaranteed, she made a small error, small inaccuracy, and didn't see that one of her pawns was left for grabs. My queen grabs the pawn. And then with the queen and the king, I was able to win the other pawn. And eventually, with seconds to go, I checkmated and I won round number one. Let's see now the review of the game. What does the computer think about the game? 90.6 accuracy for me, 87.1 for Hannah. Computer believes that my performance was 2450, while Hannah's was 2350. I believe both numbers are very, very flattering. They're way above our actual ratings, but it shows that it was a very strong and well-contested game. The various categories, I had two brilliant moves that you may remember them. The one is when I left my bishop to be taken because I was threatening checkmate, and the other was the extra pawn I won just before I stopped recording the moves. No great moves. I am surprised because when Hannah used her bishop to take my bishop in the beginning, the computer said it was a great, but somehow it did not end up in the statistics. Best moves, 12 for me, 7 for Hannah. Excellent 2 versus 8. Good 8 versus 7. Both of us get 4 book moves. Inaccuracies, I had 5, Hannah had 4. Mistakes, Hannah had 1, the one with the queen I showed before. Both of us had 1 miss, and Hannah had 1 blunder. This concludes the presentation of the first round game I played at the Chessanity, the 80th Chessanity tournament. Before I finish, there are some people I need to thank and congratulate. Congratulations to Hannah. In spite of her low rating, she played a very good game. She created all kinds of threats and difficulties for me. I had to play at almost my best to be able to win. And I believe that Hannah is a very skillful player and she has a great chess future ahead of her. Second, I need to thank once again Wesley Wang and the organizers of the Chessanity tournament. They put a lot of effort. It was not easy at all coordinate all these different sections. First of all, book the location, not easy to book the locations, coordinate everything and ensure that everything ran smoothly. And now I need to thank you, the viewers, because by watching these videos, you're telling me that it's worthwhile your time. Special thanks to the subscribers. If you would like to be aware of these videos, be notified, and also help us, all you need to do is click the subscribe button. And special thanks to the people that click the like button and to the ones that have left some positive and encouraging comments. This concludes the presentation of the first round of the 80th Chessanity tournament. In the next videos, I'm going to show to you what happened in rounds number 2 and round number 3. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Hannah Elizabeth. This is the Greco Chess YouTube channel. Goodbye.